What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about COD Zombies on the PSP, so let's get into it. Now what this is a project called NZP, Nazi Zombies Portable, and it's a fan-made zombies project designed for the PSP. It can be played either on an original PSP, using an emulator, or it can be played in your browser as well, which I made a video on a while back. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. But for this video, I'm simply going to be focusing on the PSP version, as I did notice some subtle differences, so let's get into it. Now, the first thing to check out is the graphics and the frame rate, and I must say both are pretty solid for a ported PSP game. The graphics resemble what would kind of look like a COD Zombies demake that would be designed for the PS2. PSP and PS2 games have a similar look to them, even though PSP games do have a little bit lower graphic quality than PS2 games, mostly due to the fact that the PS2 is a really solid piece of hardware, and the PSP is just a tiny little handheld. But the frame rate is also good. The frame rate runs at 30 frames per second, which is native to the PSP. You will notice some drops occasionally when a bunch of zombies load into the map, or say there's an explosion on certain other maps, because there is custom maps too, which I'll get into a little bit later. But for the most part, it will not drop below the mid-20s, and there is probably ways that you can tweak that, but for me personally, I didn't really notice any issues. It ran pretty solid, and it really only dropped a couple frames in certain scenarios, so the frame rate is definitely solid as well. Now let's talk about the movement, because obviously this is a PSP game, so you have to use PSP controls. Now what I did was I connected my PS4 controller to my tablet and mapped out all the buttons. So basically the only real control scheme that you can use to where you can actually use all of your equipment and everything is moving with face buttons, which is awkward to say the least, but once you get used to it, it's actually not too bad. The only downside is the sprinting mechanic. You have to double tap triangle to sprint, which means you're basically going to be stopped for a full second or a half a second before actually sprinting, because unlike using dual analog movement where you're moving with your left analog and you can simply just hold it down to sprint, you have to physically stop moving and then double tap the triangle button to actually activate the sprinting motion, which can get you killed, and it has gotten me killed doing that. So it's actually best to try and find a place to camp, which of course on Nocturne Toten is pretty simple, because using the early round strategy, you can just come up here and chill and play zombies like it's 2008 again, without using any form of, high round strategy, training, anything like that, because in reality it's going to be much harder to do that. And then of course the looking, you're going to be looking around with your left analog, which I cannot explain to you how unnatural that actually feels, unlike in the browser version where you can play with like standard mouse controls, or you can play with a standard controller and map it to where it's like dual analog style. On here you can't do that because it's a PSP emulator and it simply doesn't allow you to do so. And then of course there are occasional glitches like that right there. When I was standing on the stairs, it brought up a like Pathfinder failure, whatever that thing was. It was a strange glitch. It only happened to me once in my playthrough here on Nocturne Toten, but it's definitely something to look out for. I've never had the game crash, but I have seen some strange glitches. Like another one is occasionally zombies will get stuck, not outside the map, but in the map, and they will basically just run into the corners of the walls and just be stuck in like an infinite sprint, and they won't even turn around until they get shot at. So there is some strange little things that happen here and there, but overall, it feels like Nocturne Toten, and for something that you can play completely offline, not bad at all. So now let me get into the custom maps. Now when it comes to the custom maps, there's actually quite a few to pick from, which I think is pretty impressive, being that this build has been being worked on since like 2009. And there's about 13 different custom maps to play. And out of all of them, I would say this is probably the best one. It's called Warehouse Classic. It's a bigger open map, and it's pretty simple. The layout's relatively easy to get through. It does have dog rounds, which can be a bit of a challenge. I actually did go down during one of the dog rounds, mostly due to a strange hit detection error where I was aiming at the dogs and it simply wasn't hitting them, even though I was aiming right at them. But like I said, with the glitchiness, it will occasionally do some strange things. But the other thing that I've noticed is that occasionally you can be insta-downed, like you won't always get a red screen like right there. I was playing on this other map called Boxer, where it has like the worst spawns in zombies history. They basically just spawn out of the floor. There's no windows in the first room, and you have to wait before moving on because the other room that's a little bit bigger is locked behind a gate that has like a timer on it. You have to survive in the first room for like so many rounds, which is strange because there's no soul chests or really anything that makes it to where you should have to do that. So I really don't know why it's like that, but it's just a weird map. And I got insta-downed. I didn't even get a red screen. Normally it's 2-hit down with any form of COD zombies, but occasionally you will get the insta-down. Maybe it's due to like a double swipe or something like that. Don't really know, but it was very frustrating. And then, of course, with the custom maps, there is also perks and pack-a-punch on certain ones. This map has both, perks and pack-a-punch, which is cool. So if you're looking to play this, personally, out of all the versions, I would say that the browser version is the best. But of course, if you're looking to play offline, or maybe you don't have a PC or internet to begin with, this is a good version to have, because if you can get this thing downloaded on your Android device, you can play zombies offline wherever you want. And like I said, it can run on a relatively low-end Android device. Now, obviously not like a dollar store Android phone, but say like a mid-range Android smartphone, like pretty much, Samsung Galaxy style smartphone. Yes, it's going to run on there. Or maybe, some form of Android tablet, no matter which one you have. Like, I have an off-brand Android tablet that I bought on Amazon. It's some, like, aftermarket Chinese tablet, and it said it had really good specs, like octa-core processor, the Adreno 552 chipset, and stuff like that, which is pretty solid. But it actually feels a lot more sluggish than that, so it most likely has even lower specs than that, and it's running this completely fine. So I don't think you'll have a whole lot of issues when it comes to running it on a lower end device. But of course, if you have a higher end device, it will run them a lot smoother for you, and maybe certain glitchy things won't happen as much. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.